Hi, Martin.
Hi, well, how are you?
Yes, hi, Martin. Hi to everyone. It's my honor and a privilege for me to have you here today. Yo, uh, it's not always easy to catch up with incredible designers that are always busy going up and down. So let's stay tuned and we'll have a nice time with him discussing about architectural competitions and also discussing about his passion and what are his motivations in the realm of architecture. So, Martin, can you present yourself for those who don't know you, please?
I'm Martin Pretorius. I'm a South African architect. I studied in South Africa at the University of the Free State. And then later on, after graduation, I worked for 2 years as an architect in Johannesburg. I moved to Spain in Barcelona, where I did an MBA at the Polytechnical University of Catalonia, and then thereafter I moved to Cape Town. And currently, I'm still in Cape Town. I've been here for like almost 5 years now,
Yes.
and I don't really think I'm gonna move. I'm quite happy in Cape Town. Yeah.
Yes, actually, I too was thinking of moving even out of Africa, but the coronavirus stuff came and changed my view of things. You can work from any remote place in the world and everywhere around the world. It's an opportunity to collaborate with local architects in another way. Hopefully, not only virtually, but by going there and participating with them in projects. So, talk a little bit about Cape Town. Cape Town. Why not? Why not Johannesburg? Why Cape Town?
I must say, like, I don't have anything against Johannesburg. When I stayed in Johannesburg, I really enjoyed it. It's a very vibrant city, a huge cultural mix of literally everyone from all around the world. You find everything there. It's just Cape Town. Cape Town is a bit more chilled. It's a very relaxed town. Beach there. There's a lot of outdoor activities to do, and it happened to be that all my say like close friends and family over the years moved closer to Cape Town itself.
Yes.
So I would say like my base of people is generally in the Cape Town area, which makes it a bit more fun because a lot of people that I knew that stayed in Johannesburg when I was there, when I moved to Spain, they all moved down to Cape Town.
Ah, yes, that's
Um,
great.
so yeah, for me, like it's nice to stay in a place where you have close friends and family around you.
Yes, obviously, architect needs to have genuine friends and friendship because we generally are locked up in our craft. So when you go out, you need to be sure that you are surrounded with family and loved ones that can understand your way of doing. So you are designing out of the box, but living in the box. That's great.
Yeah, I must say I'm actually I'm enjoying the lockdown we had. It was actually quite a nice time where you're only on your own and you really get to experience and experiment with architecture. And actually just I took the lockdown time to just see like how can I improve myself as an architect. And then from there, I think one thing just kind of led to another, and I'm trying to keep the pace going and see where it ends up.
Yes, actually, I don't know if it is a Confucius saying, but it says if you don't take advantage of crisis, you are a loser. So it's good to say that you took advantage of it. I particularly enjoy more going back to soccer fields and playing and getting back to work and bodybuilding and stuff like that because I lose sight of all of it. But being locked really made me understand what I like to do, what I love. other outside of architecture. So outside of architecture, can you state me some interest apart hanging out in Johan and in Cape Town? And
Yeah, I must say, I think like personality types, it also plays a lot in the lockdown because I myself didn't find it that difficult, but I also have, say, like family members and friends that really hated it, that needs to get out and see people. And for me, if I'm locked in 24 hours a day and I sit in design and I do art at night, it's kind of enjoyable, I must say. But I won't say it's healthy necessarily to carry on longer than lockdown. As soon as, say, everything gets back to normal, I think it would be healthy to actually go out and go do sports and go meet new people and just try to get out more. Something that we haven't experienced in quite a while.
yes, in our last discussions, you were talking about football. You told me that you sadly choose Barcelona as the team you will support from time to time. So I can understand having went to Catalonia to study. It's kind of sad, but yes, that's your team. Let's just move on.
Yeah, yeah. I think like the times we spoke to each other, we get along. We'll probably get along really well on basically 99.9% of the things, and the only thing that we differ is a football team.
Yes, yes. And dramatically, because Barcelona and Real, even if it is just football, just passion, we need to hate each other in that point at least. But yes, like you said, 91% of things are just okay. So football is not a big deal. Uh,
Yeah, for me, like it's still like I love sport and I love watching sport, but I won't let say like sport come in and ruin a possible relationship, if that makes
oh,
sense.
of course. I think even my closest friends are Barcelona supporters because maybe I will have things to tackle each time before entering in serious discussions. So it's like something that help us think of the other one. When he loses, we call him, and yes, we cannot separate ourselves because of that. We are not like they say in English, ultra supporters. So tell us a
Yeah.
bit about what motivates you as an architect, obviously.
I I actually if I kind of thought about it um quite a while, like what is my motivation? And to be honest, like I feel like architecture and design and art is just my passion, and it's been a passion from a very young age. So I won't say there's times where I really need to sit and motivate myself in order to do architecture or to design. It's just that's what I love to do. And I think I'm very fortunate to be in a situation where I actually enjoy what I'm doing. And like my hobby as a kid was drawing and kind of designing, starting off with design. And I'm quite happy that my hobby turned into my profession.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think I'm very fortunate with that. But what I try to take now as an added motivation is just to see what can my skill and what can architecture and what can art do to change the lives of people in South Africa and probably Africa as a bigger picture, because there's a couple of projects that I'm starting out on now, and the aim is not to focus too much on what I want and what, let's say, to focus on me as a designer to get my name out there. I rather want to see what can my skill contribute to the continent.
Yes.
Because I think if you work in a direction where it's a little bit selfish, where you just want to promote yourself and promote your own ideas, there will be a ceiling that you'll hit somewhere in
Yeah.
your career. But if
Yes.
you aim to help people, you will literally never run out of people to help, because there will always just be more people out there that requires your help or a solution for the area they live in.
Yes, obviously we are living a particular area in architecture. We are shifting from star architecture mindset to people-centered architecture due to events or elements or trends sometimes like climate change, like sustainability as a whole. So I'm very excited because, like you said, we don't know what the future holds for us. Back then, architects had formulas and they would just apply formulas in their careers, maybe add on or reduce on their approach. But at the end of the day, they will just be repeating the same formula in different areas. Nowadays, we are going back to plurality, so I can just understand why where you are heading to, and I'm also enthusiastic like you to see in 5 to 10 years, 20 to 30 years, what your work will have brought, and I'm sure that obviously it will be something amazing for our continent and why not the world in general. So
Yeah, because
yeah,
I was lucky enough to meet a couple of guys from South America when I was studying in Spain.
yeah,
And one of the guys live in Peru, and I spoke to him about an idea I have for affordable housing. So I have a couple of people, I would say, that's starting to become part of the idea. It's not just in Africa, but hopefully the idea can spread into South America as well. Because there's a lot of similar problems that Africa have and South America has, especially when it comes to housing.
yes,
And
and yes, obviously we are living in quite similar climate zones areas, so
yeah,
solutions can just be dropped there and interpret according to the local cultures in a certain regard. I think is yes. Thinking about
yeah,
yes,
yeah,
I'm
because
listening.
I think there's a need currently for, let's say, architects to jump onto the social side of it, because in South Africa we actually have a lot of really good architects, internationally known architects as well.
Mhm.
But when you speak to, say, like the local communities, or you speak to housing developers, they never get in touch with, let's say, like the talented South African architects, because those guys work for, they either do extremely luxury housing or extremely tall buildings, which is amazing in itself. But I would like to shift a little bit more away from the luxury side. Obviously, the luxury, I am busy with luxury architecture as well in between, as clients come in, because at the end of the day, I'm still running a business, so you can't really say no to business. But um, my personal focus would be more towards the social side, because when I worked in Johannesburg, the firm that I worked for did a lot of affordable housing. And the problem is there's there's designs that's actually fairly good and really decent architecture. But when it gets to the implementation side, they just put all the units next to each other. So one unit should be facing north because we're in the southern hemisphere. But
Mhm.
then on site, um, things will change, and then most of the houses will end up facing west, or completely wrong direction, and that kind of defeats the whole purpose of it. So you end up with housing that's extremely hot or extremely cold, or when it comes to the materials, they don't use sufficient materials, so the insulation is really bad, and it's something that's very, I would say, just standard things in architecture. So I feel like if I can introduce something that just has upholds a certain standard, we already like one step forward. And then if I can make something that these standards are fine, and then it actually ends up looking quite decent, then I think it's a win. I think it would be successful just by focusing on very basic things, not even going that deep into architecture itself.
Yes, as architect and trained designer, I think we must not be afraid of what it looks like. Obviously, we're trained to finish with nice and good looking products. So, like you say, the most important thing is how it works, especially where we are in a continent where population growth is still quick starting and projected to be, I think, will be 2 billion by 2050, and quite a young population. In my country, like 60% of the population is less than 30 years old. You see that there. It's much and it's growing up
Yeah,
bigger, bigger and bigger. And the new generation, of course, is used to technology, is used to buying good looking thing, but because of performance. If you see, when we are going to buy a computer, we are not looking for the nice looking one. Yes, obviously, when we compare efficiency, then we choose beauty. So if we can provide nice looking architecture that works as well as they look good, then you are moving towards dropping object like you said in a particular context. And I think one of the main problem and issue is the all those urbanism and all those isms that limiting architectural creativity in both sense, because you will come in particular city, they say you will go this high, this low. The master planning actually needs also to shift from just being a political or an economical organization of maximizing plant space to a more environmental centered vision where social issues and futuristic thoughts are taken in account, because as politicians they have 5 to 7 years, 8 years, 10 years in the office, but the cities will go on and on. So ideas like yours, that's why I appreciated what you shared with me last time about photography. Maybe we'll come to it if you want, because
yeah, no, we can definitely talk about that as well.
yes, because it will help remind, using a direct form of art like painting, that the way, the path is longer than our journey, than our personal journeys. So yes, obviously you are an inspiring architect, but what are your references in architecture? Do you have any architect that is an inspiration for your work, or everything just comes from your your own imagination? Or
I would say I have a couple of architects that I do admire for their work, but I won't say I necessarily follow in their footsteps. One of the things that I do like quite a lot, like with Japanese architects, is the use of natural light. So I won't look exactly at the way they design. I just look at certain aspects. So I've found that the Japanese architects, they really work well with using natural light. So I would focus on that aspect alone of the work that I look at Japanese architects. There's a couple of South American architects that I do like myself, just the way that they combine natural materials, but not necessarily looking at the form giving that they practice themselves. And then obviously, like architects like Jacques Rougerie, for just the kind of futuristic vision he's trying to put into architecture.
yes.
Um, So for me, when I look at him, I really like that the vision that he has. So what I try to do in my own architecture is to incorporate, say, the natural light aspect that I've learned through following Japanese architecture, the let's say um, the use of materials that some of the South American architects use, and then also try to combine it with visionary architects that's kind of pushing. Because Zaha did obviously also falls part of the visionary architecture that she kind of started this movement. And Jacques Rougerie is still working, also trying to promote that. So I'm a big fan of working towards the future, because the past happened and we can't really change that. But the only thing we can change is what's happening now and what's happening tomorrow and the day after, and then just try to build on and just be just kind of fill your role as a human on earth, because my time is limited. There's going to be there's a time for birth and a time for death, and in between, all I want to do is try to contribute to making the earth like a better place. And then afterwards, another young architect is going to come up, and they're probably going to hopefully take what I've done, or they come up with something new and just push it forward for themselves.
Yes, obviously, I was about to ask you then, as a earth-based architect, somebody who is straight on the point, what brought you to be designing for Jacques Rougerie competition? But I can understand that inspiring vision is something that you're eager to go towards too. So, how is the architectural competition thing in your country? Is it popular?
So, um, the only architecture competitions that I've ever come across was basically while I was a student. Um, I've, especially during lockdown, I actually started looking for architecture competitions to join and to enter, and I haven't found it. And that's why I started just searching online. Luckily, you just type in architecture competitions on Google, and it gives you quite a long list of things. And then, yeah, what? But one thing the I would say the junior ambassador give me opportunity to is actually to start going to universities, and especially local universities that has architecture or engineering, and say, well, look here, there's this Jacques Rougerie competition, and actually promote it within the South African context, because there's really, I would say, when it comes to the competition side in architecture, there's quite a big lack in the country.
Yes, but obviously, like in my country, I'm sure that there are many young and enthusiast students and professionals that are ready and can be up to the challenge, but are not just motivated enough or are even aware of the competition. So it's part of our job and our work to promote it. One of the reason of these videos is to help have a message towards those architects, because having discussed with some, they say yes, Jacques Rougerie is fine, but it's kind of, we have problems now and on earth here, but you guys are designing stuffs in Mars and the moon, in the oceans and everything. But when they listen to architects like you who will say that yes, there's a way to develop ideas, there's a way to project the ideas, and there are ways to tackle local and discuss with population to bring a new project, they understand that it's part of your research methodology to participate to those type of competitions, and it gives you also an opportunity to discuss with young amazing architects around the world to renew your mind each time. So kudos to you being able to move from university to university. And I too have been doing that. We have an event called Archi-Talk that is an annual event. This year will be the fifth year. I'm sure you've been invited. I don't know if they sent you the invitation already, the formal
Yeah, I
invitation.
think you've mentioned it before.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would be great to join.
Yes, and during that event, also talking about Jacques Rougerie will be great because generally we have 200 to 300 students there and representing all the schools in the country. And hopefully in the sub-region when COVID will finish. And online, yes, has no limit.
Yeah, because I must say it's quite difficult to promote it, especially in COVID, because a lot of universities do online studying and stuff. So I think I personally believe that the majority of vaccine rollouts would happen during this year. So I think from 2022, um, the traveling around or going to universities and trying to set up meetings with staff and students will be a bit more successful.
Yeah, that's good. So, yes, obviously you've participated in many competitions. What are your criteria to participate in competitions? And yes, what are your criteria? Is it the prize or the number of deliverable or the topic? What motivates you participating?
I would say it's definitely the topic. I always even now next to my laptop I have this small black sketchbook. And every now and then when I have good ideas, I just sketch the idea in the book, and I kind of forget about it. And every now and then, when I come across a competition where I feel like, okay, this idea actually fits the competition fairly well, I'm motivated to enter the competition, and that's how I pick which competition I want to enter. Because sometimes, to be honest, sometimes I have good ideas, and there's days that my ideas aren't that good. So I try to match my good ideas to a specific competition, and that's the prizes and everything that comes with it. It's just a bonus, but yeah, I don't think it's prize driven, because even if I do enter a competition, it doesn't mean I'm going to win the competition.
Yes.
But at least if I have an idea and I can use the competition to develop it, at the end of the day, even if I receive no recognition for the competition, I at least have a fully developed idea that I can either put on my website, or I can start sharing locally and see maybe there's someone that's interested in it, or we can develop.
Yes, obviously, if someone enters in architectural competitions to make money, I think it's not a good business plan, obviously, because
It's probably a very bad like
yes,
strategy to make money.
yes, you better enter there to develop ideas that you can later on use in personal project or in your own stuff. Because as architect, nothing stops us from being entrepreneurs too. So we ought to develop ideas and to be able to market them from time to time, but also just to be sure that our ideas have an echo and see where we can stand as architect and know where we are as part as our journey, but also develop skills because competition is a challenge after all.
Yeah, I must say, one of the things that I enjoy the most for the competition is actually doing the presentations and stuff like that. And that's something that you don't necessarily get to do when you're a practicing architect. Um, I don't necessarily design a full presentation to put forth for clients. It's generally just like your A1 sheets that all architects are used to, and you kind of um, work on the sheet to exhibit your work towards the client. So
Yes,
it's the presentation part is something that I really enjoy.
I don't even do the A1 sheet. Generally, if you are in front of me, I'll just open the soft. I use Revit, and all the element I did, if the climate analysis, whatever, I'll just be explaining you and showing the direct product and going on and forth. It's rare unless when it's
Yeah,
enterprises or corporations or associations where I'll do presentation. But if it's just a someone want his house, his small hotel or whatever,
yeah.
yes. And you
Well,
touch the point.
yeah. For
Architectural
me, like
competitions.
I just have a laptop, and generally the screen is a bit too small to do that.
Yeah.
Maybe I must invest in like a nicer, bigger screen, and then I can. I also don't have to waste time on A1 presentations.
Yes. Even though you can buy a small projector, even phones nowadays can project on a white wall. It depends.
Yeah.
So do you have specific methodology to elaborate on your proposals?
I won't say there's any specific methodologies. I think each project that I do kind of develops its own methodology. But one thing that I do focus on is basically just to design something that would be sustainable and would be a contribution towards the earth and towards humanity in itself. Because especially in South Africa, when it comes to design methodologies, there's quite a let's say conservative methodology being generally applied to everything. So a house looks like a house, the church looks like the church, the
Obviously.
mall looks like the mall. And what I want to do is I want to challenge those methodologies a little bit. And I think the only way to to really challenge it is by doing a unique project for the unique site. And every project that I've worked on so far differs completely from the previous one, from a design point and a form giving side. So I would like to keep that side of architecture a bit open and a bit more experimental. Maybe one day I get to a specific methodology, but at this stage, I would be lying if I say there is one.
Yeah. I think it's Daniel Beskin discussing on the issue that his project looked alike, but with programs being different. He said that for him, a house is a church is a mall is an hotel. So at the end of the day, all is architecture, and if it is architecture, you come out with a product, and that was to defend the constructivism and their approach of form giving. Nowadays, you can say the same thing when discussing the issue of climate change and the use of materials and uh, the integrations in sites and everything to have genuine architecture. So it's good to know that you are just about providing shelter and then finding other ways around to solve the problems. So you obviously, like I said, there were did many competitions and designs. Among all of them, which one you like the most and why?
Well, the Jacques Rougerie one for me is definitely one of the favorites, just because it's such an interesting shape, and for me, it's quite an interesting building because it's not really a building; it's more a ship than an actual building itself. And then the other competition is also in lockdown. I won the San Francisco Affordable Housing Challenge, which is also quite a favorite of mine, just because it kind of it challenges the way we look at affordable housing in the sense where the house actually, or the housing transcends over the road. Because if you look at cities and how our cities are developed, all the spaces above the roads, especially in South Africa and in San Francisco, especially, all the space is kind of wasted. So
Mm-hmm.
if you look at a section through the city, you'll have a lot of high rises, or you'll have houses on each side of the road, but the road itself mainly remains open. But you don't need, say, like 20, 30, 40 meters above a road to be open, because you'd only require maybe like 5 or 6 meters to be open, and all the space above that is just kind of wasted. So the idea was to try and use those wasted spaces, but we as people in a city don't necessarily notice that these spaces are wasted because something is happening on the ground. But we can be using the space above roads for anything really. We can have parks. I think one of the projects that I've been to myself is there's a park development in Seoul in South Korea, where the park basically floats above the city and goes over the roads. And some projects like that's really interesting for me because it just looks at space in a 3D cube instead of like on a urban design flat 2D plan layout.
Mm-hmm.
It brings a bit more volume to the city itself, and I think that's where we should be moving towards if we really want to start saving space.
Yes, that's why as I said, why I'm fighting against the isms. They should empower a little bit the architects and the ideas developer for us to have new solutions, not always to normalize everything according to what I don't know. But let's keep it contextual each time. All cities must not be alike. You move from one city to another, you don't see any change. This maybe a specific monument that will say that yes, I'm actually in this city, but nothing changes. And as architects,
Yeah,
we must yes, we must design the way we want to live our lives.
yeah, I think it's just especially with the San Francisco housing, it's just pointing out something that's that people thought is actually quite a nice and innovative idea. But for me, it's always been kind of um, there. It's always been for me a bit of a noticeable design flaw in the way we do cities. Because,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
yeah, the one thing for me with that competition is this kind of pointing out an obvious space that's being wasted.
yes.
So the idea is out there. So hopefully someone else sees it, or we can build something in the future that would start to accommodate those spaces that's being used.
Yes, it will come to pass. So, you're a prolific designer actually and an architect too. How do you take advantage of legacy? How do you appreciate uh, also the outside look, of course, on your course or on your journey?
I think when it comes to legacy, I don't necessarily see myself as having a legacy yet. Um,
Yes, it's true that my question is about not your legacy, but let's say the history of architecture in your country or in the history of architecture in general. What do you take advantage of legacy?
Well, I think especially like the history of architecture in South Africa is quite a difficult thing to analyze, because if you look at the history of South Africa, it's fairly well known across the world what the history is in South Africa, and there's always been, say, like, groups fighting against each other. And one thing that I would that I've been working on with, so like smaller tribes in and around South Africa, is to basically take their legacy and try to create something for them, because it feels like everything is becoming international. So all the buildings are starting to look more or less the same. If you travel between different CBDs, there's a lot of CBDs that actually look exactly the same. So I think one of the things that architects should be doing is look at your history, look at your legacy, and then be proud of it and try to promote it in a sense. Because I think there's a lot of cultures in the world that's kind of being left behind, and they just kind of follow onto the commercial trend of architecture. And because especially if you look at one of the biggest groups in South Africa, like the Zulu tribe or the Xhosas, um, how do their architecture look? Because in history they have a very distinct architecture and shape and form giving and even side patterns that they use. But if you look at contemporary architecture today, there's nothing that resembles that. There's nothing that actually promotes that. And I've worked recently with a Zulu architect, and his stuff is very westernized, um, and it feels like the clients that comes to him, they want kind of westernized architecture interventions in their towns. But I think it's a very dangerous route to take, because why don't you promote that legacy that you have, and I
Mhm.
promote the legacy that I have, and then just with all the cultural inputs, then South Africa as a whole will start having a very unique architectural experience, and that counts for, I would say, every country um, in the world. Everyone has a legacy, but I feel like in the contemporary times, the legacy are being left behind a little bit.
I think climate change is giving us an opportunity to go back to learn from traditional architecture, in a sense that generally those architecture are well integrated in their context as far as material used and energy efficiency, waste management. So it's not just culture for the beauty of it, but I think it must go back to culture for how it works in any particular environment. And in that regard, we will not just have a westernized look, but we'll go back to plurality, to local typologies, to develop from it. And one of my challenge is how to balance it, have an encounter between artificial intelligence and his promises, and traditional architecture and his certitudes, and mix him together with the mindset of contemporary design, or the mindset of the clients, the millenniums that are in front of me. I think that's the challenge I'm working towards, being able to have what could be called in 200 years traditional architecture, because we will be a mix of local possibilities and typologies with artificial intelligence, something like that.
Yeah, because I think one of the things that, well, obviously that I didn't mention is the sustainability side. I think for me, I sometimes when I talk about architecture don't necessarily even mention sustainability, because for me it's almost as if it has to be included. You don't even have to kind of discuss it. That is a
Yes,
a starting point, and it's a must. And then
yes,
from there you can push it forward. But I
yes.
think we still have a way to go when it comes to sustainability, because what I've experienced in practice is, even though I am very pro sustainable, is I still have clients, and if the client isn't necessarily that pro sustainable, it really influences the project so much that the project itself might end up, say, 40% or 30% less sustainable than what you've originally had in mind. So I think, apart from promoting sustainability amongst architects, I think architect to architect we understand it, but we have to start influencing the broader community, the people that actually comes with their personal projects or clients, or the people that has the money behind all the projects.
Yes, but I think for small, I won't say small in consideration, but small scale project and private personal project. With the lockdown, many people and clients have changed their view of architecture because they can understand now that houses must perform more than what they're actually doing. When you are locked down, you have no work, and the bills are coming in, electricity bill, heating bill, cooling bills, and whatever. You
Yeah,
you understand that you need to change the way of going using things. So, like I said, you just learn to take advantage of the crisis. Yes, we have talked a lot of importance of architectural competitions and also of Jacques Rougerie Foundation. So the last question, I'll summarize it into one. Why is it important to participate, obviously, and what are the tips you have for young students and young architects as a Jacques Rougerie's ambassador?
well, I would say one of the let's start with the advantages, is actually to test your ideas in a, especially in an international setting, to see where you are, or to see how good your ideas are. And it's not necessarily to say, if you win you have a good idea, and if you don't win you have a bad idea. The focus should be more on personal development, and that's I think that should be the message behind why enter into architecture competition, is actually just to develop your personal ideas. Because you might enter competition, say, 5 years ago, you already have the idea developed, and there might be an opportunity in the future to introduce that idea, and then you already have it developed. You don't have, you can go to the client with a full presentation, or to a company with a full presentation, and say, look, this is an idea I worked on. Um, I can see this work for you. And I would say that the tips for students entering competition is, choose the competition carefully. Don't just search a competition and the first one you find you enter. Search a couple of competitions, and then from there see in which competition would you want to develop a specific idea, and pick it strategically rather than just picking an idea. And because for me, what the competition entries ended up in is actually being a junior ambassador, which for me is, it's quite a big honor to be a junior ambassador for Jacques Rougerie, because I've read about him, and I know exactly who he is as an architect. Throughout all my years of studying and being an architect, I followed his work, and to be part of a group of people that takes his foundation and pushes his vision, and to be part of his vision in a sense, and promoting it, is quite a huge honor for me. And obviously, um, for your own personal growth and your own CV and your own being as an architect. It's always it's a huge honor and a huge plus.
Yes, surely it's a huge honor, and it's also an opportunity to discuss with great young future Zaha Hadid, like he himself usually says in his platform, future great architects. So at least we must participate in those competitions because, like you said, it's personal development first before money and star architectural behavior. So
Like
it was, yes,
even if also if it wasn't for for entering the competition, like I wouldn't have been here chatting to you, which is
yes,
also quite
it's
quite
quite obvious that
quite.
we won't have known each other at, at least this early in our journey.
Yeah, because like we've previously spoke to each other and like open to collaborate with each other, and it just opens up more avenues for you as an architect. So now I know I know you, and if I have a good idea or I have a project that I want to bring you in, or vice versa,
Yes, of
the
course.
opportunity is there, and I think that that's great. The more you put yourself out there, the more opportunities will come to your side, and I think that's the end result of entering all the competitions.
Yes, and actually, since next year we have the African Cup of Nation year, I've been thinking about how to, if your photographic project is ready, how to have a even a virtual vernissage here because there will be a lot of visitors and interest and potential business and whatever, just opportunities. So it was nice to have you, and I'm very honored to have discussed with you. I hope this will inspire young architects and designers, students in various fields that are interested in the built environment. So thank you very much.
Thank you for the opportunity.